Tez Johnson's one of the reasons Oregon's offense will be great again this year, and he could be even better than you think.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, wherever you listen to or watch this show, which is brought to you today by our friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. So, Tez Johnson's going to crush it, along with the rest of the Oregon pass catchers this year. 5 guys. One of you asked for 5 under-the-radar guys who could break out this season, and I actually could have come up with even more than that. And should Oregon pursue a 4-star tight end in the 25 cycle who's committed elsewhere? The answer to that question is yes, all coming up on today's show. But let's start with Tez Johnson. So, amongst all of the reasons that Oregon's going to have a great offense this year, a veteran, proven productive quarterback, a good offensive line with one question in Matthew Bedford and when he gets back from injury, but even if he doesn't, it'll be good. If he does come back and is fully healthy, Oregon's offensive line should be great once again. But amongst the reasons, with a great running back room, Tez Johnson is going to be Oregon's leading receiver this year. I think Evan Stewart is going to have the best season of his career, and I'll get to him in just a moment. But the more I think about Tez Johnson, the more I think he's going to have a monster year. Preseason All Big Ten, getting all sorts of, award watch list recognitions. He's on the watch list for the best receiver in the country. The name of that award is escaping me right now. But everywhere that you go, Tez Johnson is kind of there. Like, you talk about Oregon on a national level, on a local level, Tez Johnson is going to be there. So last season for the Ducks, he had 86 catches for 1,182 yards and 10 touchdowns. The Oregon record, which was set by Troy Franklin last year in receiving yards for a season, is 1,333. I think Tez Johnson can push for that this season. And the record for touchdowns is 13, also set by Troy Franklin last year. And I think that for Tez Johnson, he is just someone that started a lot slower than you probably realize. Troy Franklin had 14 touchdowns last year, not 13, 14 touchdowns. And could Tez Johnson get to that number? That's tough because he's not a big-bodied guy, so he's not inherently a red zone target. He is, however, a dynamic yards after the catch guy. So we'll see how he gets employed in this year's offense compared to last year. I imagine it is very similar. But think about this for Tez Johnson. In the first 5 games of last year, he averaged per game 3 receptions for just over 40 yards. And he had 4 touchdowns in that span. Over the last 9 games of the year, he came into his own in a big way. He really strengthened that connection with Bo Nix. Did you know that they were brothers? Did you know? Did you know? I hadn't heard, but then I was watching highlights back the other day, and I heard it on the broadcast. I was like, whoa, never heard that before. So over the last 9 games last season, he averaged almost 8 receptions per game and 108 yards per contest, including 100-plus yard efforts in 4 of his final 6 games. Is this a different quarterback? Yes. Is it a capable one? Also yes. But it's the same offensive system, and the receiving core is essentially the same. And I do believe his role should be the exact same as last year. This is a rinse and repeat. And you look at his numbers from last year, and they were wildly impressive. He had a game with 0 catches. Stanford. He played in the game. I don't remember if he finished the whole game. I mean, Oregon starters were out by the end of it. But still, regardless, he had 0 catches in the game. And yet he still set the Oregon single-season record for receptions, a mark he could push for once again this year. And he had almost 1,200 yards receiving. So he could be in for just a monster campaign. And I'm stoked to see how he and Dylan Gabriel develop their chemistry throughout the course of the year. That's not the only pass catcher that Oregon fans, of course, should be excited to watch, because you have 3 guys from last year's team in the pass catching group, not counting running backs, that you know exactly what they are, and they're really good. Trayshawn Holden, Gary Bryant Jr., Terrence Ferguson. They were all over 400 yards receiving last year. I'm beyond curious. I'm not in a hurry to get to the end of the regular season. I am curious to see how the numbers shake out at that time, because all three of those guys were over 400 yards receiving. Bucky Irving was also over 400 yards receiving. So when you talk about how many yards each guy's going to have, what their numbers will look like at the end of the year, you have to factor in that Bo Nix used the running backs quite a bit in the passing game last year. Is Dillon Gabriel going to have that same propensity? Or is he going to lean on, as a safety blanket, Tez Johnson a little bit more? Or will he get Evan Stewart involved? Or will he go to Terrence Ferguson more? T-Ferg hasn't had a 500-yard season in his career, which is, a pretty solidly high watermark for a tight end to get to. I could see Terrence Ferguson having the best receiving season of his career. Between Gary Bryant Jr., Trayshawn Holden, and T-Ferg, one of them is going to have a 500-plus yard season. I feel pretty confident in saying that, depending on how the running backs get used in the passing game. And Jordan James, we know, is a capable pass catcher. Noah Whittington is a really good one. We saw Jay Harris catch a couple of passes in the spring game as well, so I think they're all there. But Evan Stewart's kind of the wild card here. So if you give everyone, just as a baseline assumption, roughly the same numbers as a season ago, there's a big void. And that's 1,300 yards plus 1,383 to be exact, and 14 touchdowns from Troy Franklin and over 80 receptions. Evan Stewart has not yet had a 1,000-yard season in his career, and he has spoken several times about how much better he likes things at Oregon, how much better the quarterback play is at Oregon compared to Texas A&M, and it's higher level. You look at the guys that they had last year, it was a revolving door. There were injuries, like Connor Wegman, pretty good player. Don't know if he's on Dillon Gabriel's level. He's not quite as proven as a college quarterback, but he's going to be the starter this year for Texas A&M. Hoot side note, play a very fun game against Notre Dame on Saturday. That's where game day is this week. And hopefully that same crew is in Eugene on October 12th for Ohio State. But I digress. Evan Stewart has legitimate second-round talent at the wide receiver position, maybe even first. I don't know if he can get into that level. He'd have to have a pretty monster season. But from a physical trait standpoint, if he stays healthy and produces throughout the entire year, I can see him going over 1,000 yards. But does he get close to Troy Franklin's number? Maybe not. So let's say he has, 1,000 yards exactly on the dot, or just a little bit over. You've got about 350 receiving yards, give or take, to disperse throughout the rest of this Oregon roster if Dillon Gabriel gets to those sorts of numbers. And if Oregon has the number of playoff games that they should, if the season goes according to plan, then all of that is entirely possible there. On the Dillon Gabriel front, I want to make a revision, because I went back and looked at Bo Nix's numbers last year. And I said recently on the show that 8 was the number of 300-yard passing games I expect Dillon Gabriel to have this year. I'm going to revise that down, and I'll explain why. Bo Nix had 7 such games last year. I've said for a while, I like Dillon Gabriel. He's the best quarterback in the Big Ten. I do not think he's as good as Bo Nix. I do not think he's going to have the best statistical season, arguably, in the history of Oregon football at the quarterback position. But is he going to have a great year? Yeah, he is going to have a really good year, probably the best of his career. 8 300-yard games in the Big Ten where you're going up against better defenses on the whole. I'm going to nudge that down to 6. And Bo Nix last year had 7 300-yard games, and he had 2 games where he's in the 290-yard range. So would it be crazy for Gabriel to get to 8? No. But frankly, off the top of my head, I thought Bo Nix's number was higher. So I'll just revise that prediction ever so slightly. And I think it's also a testament, my confidence in moving that, is that Oregon is going to be able to run the football behind this offensive line, and they want to run the football behind this offensive line. And you're going to have games, potentially, such as at Michigan and at Wisconsin in November, where it's not particularly easy to throw the ball. So I think Gabriel in the regular season is at or above 300 yards every other game. I believe that starts this Saturday against Idaho. 4 days. 4 days away. Look, I don't even have a full hand worth of fingers here until Oregon football. Cannot wait. One of you asked for 5 guys that'll break out this year. 5. I thought that was daunting. It wasn't. That's coming up next. Coming up right now, 5-hour energy. Tired after lunch? You're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5-hour energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. They have zero sugar and a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. When I get into the afternoons during play-by-play season, I've got a lot of stuff to do where I have to just sit down at a computer and grind. 5-hour energy is the exact sort of product that can help me avoid the urge to take a nap, which I am indeed a big proponent of. And they have a bunch of flavors. They've got watermelon, they've got tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone. You can build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and then 5-hour energy delivers it right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, and then hourenergy.com, and get some 5-hour energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order. Cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Locked on CFB. That's the code at 5hourenergy.com. Go check them out today. What gives me more juice, a 5-hour energy or a second segment sip? The answer is a 5-hour energy. But second segment sips are rejuvenating nevertheless. So I got a very daunting, at least at first, question from Nathan. The mailbag, always open. YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, you go join the flock in the description below to become a Locked On Ducks insider. Free 14-day trial to all those who sign up. Nathan wants 5 breakout candidates not getting enough love. 5 that are not getting enough love, that are flying under the radar. I started to think about this. Man, can I really come up with 5? Can I get 5 guys that are going to make an impact that didn't last year, that Oregon fans are not talking enough about, or that I'm not talking enough about? It turns out, indeed, I could. So one of them, and the number one guy, is Devon Jackson. Devon Jackson is arguably the most important breakout player for Oregon defensively this year because, well, there are 2 reasons. Number one, he's the number 3 guy on the depth chart. Oregon played 5 linebackers last year. Devon Jackson was one of them. He's the number 3 on the depth chart this year. I think he's ahead of Bryce Betcher, and that's someone who's going to see the field a lot in critical situations. Number 2 is Justin Jacobs, who, when he was on the field last year, was a good player for the Ducks. I like Justin Jacobs. He has an injury history. He was not healthy to begin last season. Once he got on the field, he was able to stay there. But any guy that has an injury history in the past, those sorts of ugly things, unfortunately, can rear their heads again. So one little ding to Justin Jacobs, and Devon Jackson is suddenly one of your starting 11 players on defense. And Dan Lanning had praiseworthy words to say about him in the speed episode of that team out west, because he's one of the fastest guys on the team, which is pretty impressive for a linebacker. And he said over the first couple of years, he was running really fast, but not in the right direction. And now he feels like he's running more in the right direction. If he maximizes his physical traits and becomes the sort of football player that Oregon knows he's capable of being, he'll be Oregon's number 1 linebacker in 2025. I feel really, really confident in saying that, and I think that'd be a pretty good spot for Oregon to be. So that's one guy. Another one, Solomon Davis. Solomon Davis, I believe, led everyone in the spring game in tackles with 7 all the way back in April. Has reportedly made the shift from corner to safety, which makes a lot of sense because there are a lot of corners in the room, and there are not as many safeties, and there are a lot more questions at that position. More on that in a moment. And Solomon Davis is not a brand new college football player. And when you go back and watch the plays that he made in that spring game, look pretty good. He looked quite good. And so I won't be surprised if he's someone that is on the 2 deep. And by the way, Jared Mack tweeted out the Oregon quote-unquote 2 deep that got released, and it was just everyone in their position in numerical order. That's the 2 deep that we've got going into the first game against Idaho. So, as usual, from Dan Lanning, incommunicado. And we'll just find out which one of the reasons of many that I'm excited to watch the game on Saturday. So, Solomon Davis is one option, or Peyton Woodyard. I think one of those 2 guys, I lean towards Davis because of the experience factor. Woodyard's especially a true freshman. I also, however, have Aaron Flowers on this list. I mean, someone has to be the backup on the 2 deep to Kobe Savage, Oregon's starting free safety, and Tiebreaker Johnson, who's probably going to start at strong safety. Or, boundary safety, if you prefer. Boundary safety, field safety, call it whatever you like. Those guys are going to have some sort of role. If a guy has to come out for a play, if a guy goes down with an injury, or if a guy is just tired and needs to come out of the game, whatever. Oregon got dinged up in the secondary last year. At one point in time, you had Triquez Bridges and Nico Reed as the 2 starting outside corners. Well, that wasn't what you'd projected going into the year. That's the way it works out sometimes. So I think Davis or Woodyard, probably Davis the more likely of the 2. And then the more I watch Aaron Flowers, On3 rated him as a preseason freshman All-American, and he looks really impressive. He's a really, really impressive guy. I'd love for him to have, a role. Certainly someone I expect to see at the very least on Saturday against Idaho, but I'm interested to see what happens in that safety room, because I think this year, they've got a couple of solid starters in Kobe Savage and Tiebreaker Johnson. Really interested to see what Savage brings to the table at that free safety spot. But going forward, this is a very talented room, but the foundation for who starts going forward and who impresses the coaches, that'll start this season. Charlie Pickard, that's another one. It looks more and more like Charlie Pickard is going to start at center on Saturday. And until Matthew Bedford is able to return and they can slide Poncho back over to the center spot and put Bedford, the Indiana transfer, at right guard, that's a name that Oregon fans have to know. If you are going to Autzen Stadium and you see number 70 snapping the ball back to Dylan Gabriel in the first offensive snap of the season, that's who it is. Former walk-on, Jesuit high school guy, and he had Division I offers, but not a whole lot of Power 4 offers. I think it was Oregon State, and maybe one other, and he ended up being a walk-on at Oregon, and he might be a guy that earns himself a scholarship by the end of the year, depending on how the first few games go. Frankly, either way, if he's being called upon to suddenly be Oregon's starting center. I mean, think about it. 2 years ago, Alex Forsyth was the starting center. Last year, Remington Award winner Jackson Powers Johnson. This year, former walk-on who became the starting center essentially in the final 10 days leading up to the season because of an injury. Not an easy spot to be in, but such is life. Last guy, Aiden Breland. Brian Smith is really high on him and his ability to make an impact as a true freshman. Someone's going to fill those rotation spots along the defensive line. I'll lean Aiden Breland, former 5-star recruit, coming to Oregon this year. Technically a highly rated 4-star, but whatever. He's really good. I think he could have a great Oregon career. We'll see if he is able to carve out a consistent role throughout the course of the season. Nathan also says, it hurts me to say, but I've got the following guys on my list who are set to underwhelm. Dickey and Casper, that's Jurion Dickey, Kyler Casper, Roderick Pleasant, Dalen Austin, Davey Uli, Kamari Terrell, Jalil Florence. It's now or never for Kamari Terrell. What do you think? Yeah, I mean, Terrell was not a super highly touted recruit, really fast. Talk about fastest guys on the team. He could be up there. I don't have big hopes for him. Maybe he's one of the guys that makes a move to safety or carves out a role for himself at nickel. But I'm not as down on the other guys. Iuli, if he comes back healthy, I think is a really, really solid player. But I think that for the other guys, Jurion Dickey, Kyler Casper, Jurion, by all reports, is the healthiest he's been so far in just his second season. Of course, when he wasn't healthy last year, Kyler Casper, I feel like every time I see a clip of him in a spring game or a practice highlight or that team out west or whatever, he's making a big play and he's flashing the big body that we know he has. But the receiver room is just so good. And we'll see if he does get any sort of opportunity. He'd certainly be a prime transfer candidate if he doesn't have a big role this year. He's stuck around at Oregon this long, though. So he must really like Junior Adams and or really believe that he's going to have his moment in the sun. And look, you're always one injury away from being thrust into a significantly larger role. And I think for Kyler Casper going into his third football season, I'm sure there is a part of him that's disappointed or frustrated that he hasn't seen the field. He hasn't contributed in a major way. I mean, he hasn't caught a touchdown, I don't believe. Going into his third year for the caliber recruit that he was, that's not what most of us would have expected. I also would have expected him to maybe transfer out if he didn't play a lot last year, which he didn't. So maybe he's playing the long game and knows that he just needed a lot more development. Jurion Dickey, unclear. Just because of the injury factor. The cornerback room, I think Roderick Pleasant is more likely to play than Dalen Austin this year because he could slide into that nickel role. I suppose Austin could if he trains there, but I think Dalen Austin's more of an outside corner, whereas Pleasant can play inside and out, and with his body type, I think fits really well at that nickel spot. And then Jalil Florence, I'm a big Jalil Florence fan. Not sure if he's ready. Injury-wise, I don't know if Jalil Florence is ready. So I could see a couple of those guys underwhelming compared to their potential, but they're not going to underwhelm me compared to my expectations for them. So that was a good question. 5 breakout candidates, was able to nail it. There are a couple others, and by the way, drop below breakout candidates or stat predictions. Forgot to mention that earlier in today's show. How many yards do you think X receiver has, or Y receiver has, or this receiver, that receiver, or whatnot? Going back to the recruiting trail, 4-star tight end committed to Washington. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for Oregon to pursue Vander Ploog. That's a name to know. That's coming up next. Hey, Locked On Ducks fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game I think you're going to love, Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Presumably, that'd be Oregon if you're listening to or watching this show. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Ducks and taking that with you in your pocket anywhere you go? That's what you can do in Ultimate College Football HC. It's completely free, has no ads, 100% playable offline, and you get to call the offensive plays. So your play calling, your strategy determines the future and immediate success of your program. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Ducks fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, Vander Ploog should be someone Oregon goes after. So, 4-star tight end, top 24/7 player, top 15 tight end in the class of 2025, currently committed to Washington. So Oregon has kind of struck out so far on the tight end recruiting front. They were after 5-star Lincoln Cure. He went to Kansas State, stayed home. They got Deshaun Brame, though, and he then flipped to Tennessee. And they were going after Caleb Edwards, and he ended up going to Alabama. So Oregon currently doesn't have a tight end committed in the class of 2025. That's not a position you can easily find players available in the transfer portal. If you look at the big portal moves, Benjamin Urasic going from Stanford to Georgia in this offseason is one of the more high-profile tight end moves that have happened in the portal. I don't know why that's the case. It's not that guys can't be available. Oregon found Casey Kelly going into last year from Ole Miss. He was a third-string guy. So you just don't have high-profile tight ends. They're home bodies, I guess. I don't know. I might have to ask Brian Smith about that one day. But it's a position you have to be able to stack talent in the high school ranks. Oregon's going to lose Terrence Ferguson and Patrick Herbert after the season to graduation. Kenyon Sadiq, probably the number 1 tight end next year. I think that's great. They've got AJ Pugliano and Roger Saliapaga in the class of 2024. One of those or both of those true freshmen could end up taking the field once Oregon gets the game in control on Saturday against Idaho. That game is a 4:30 Pacific time kick on Big Ten Network, for those who don't know. But Vander Ploog is a name that would make a lot of sense. So Oregon has offered him, tried to get in on his recruitment. He hasn't visited Oregon yet, but I am not aware of an immediate commitment date upcoming for the blue chip tight end prospect. So if Oregon could get a visit during the season, that would certainly raise the chances. Like if you see everything right now surrounding him is, they offered and there's a rumor or rumbling, noise, chitter, chatter, and all that sort of stuff. Nothing's incredibly serious right now, but I expect this to be, a name and or a position that Oregon looks to add in the 2025 class, because Michael Terry III has got a prediction from Steve Wiltfong at On3 to go to Texas. Now, he's someone who can play tight end, receiver, running back, defensive end, linebacker. Like, he's truly the number one athlete in the class of 2025, yeah, it'd be great for Oregon to get him. If he ends up going to Texas, though, Ploog is the guy to look for at the tight end position. He's also been recruited by Utah, UCLA, Arizona State. He is a West Coast kid. That's a name that I think Oregon fans that will continue to follow recruiting throughout the season, which everybody should, because there will be a handful more commitments for the Ducks throughout the year. Remember, Aiden Breland committed last year, the day of the Washington game in Seattle. But I expect Oregon, whose 2025 class has 15 players in it right now, to land a couple more to get back inside the top 10. It'd be great if they got back inside the top 5. I think that'd be pretty tough. Given the way the last month on the recruiting trail has gone. So I still think Oregon is in a good spot. They're the number 12 class nationally, according to 24/7 Sports. But they will have to get more players. They won't just magically get inside the top 10. You got to get guys. You got to get some blue chip guys. And Vander Ploog would certainly qualify there. And he has maybe the most unique name of anybody that Oregon has recruited this cycle. Couple of housekeeping items before I wrap up today's show. The Big Ten does not have divisions anymore, which I think is great. I think it's a good thing for college football. The Big Ten, Oregon's conference, as weird as that sounds, it's strange, but that's where we are. They released their tiebreaker rules for the Big Ten championship game. Thought some of you might be interested to know if you didn't see it. Tiebreaker number 1, head-to-head. Plain and obvious. Tiebreaker number 2, the tied teams will be compared based on record against all common conference opponents. Okay? So if you have a common opponent that Oregon has beaten and say Michigan or Penn State or whoever lost to, then you get the tiebreaker there. These tiebreaker rules look very similar to the way the Pac-12 had it structured. Tiebreaker number 3 is perhaps the most interesting one. The tied teams, and this is in order, so you go head-to-head first, common or record against all common conference opponents, and then to number 3. The tied teams will be compared based on record against common opponents with the best conference record and proceeding through the common conference opponents based on their order of finish within the conference standings. That, I believe, is just a look at who has beaten the most highly ranked teams in the Big Ten based on their conference record compared to the other. That's tiebreaker number 3. Number 4, the tied teams will be compared based on the best cumulative conference winning percentage of all conference opponents. Number 5, representative will be chosen by Sports Sorts Analytics. And number 6, random draw among the tied teams. I have any doubt that any tiebreaker would get beyond number 3. If Oregon goes 11-1, no problem here. You go 11-1, 12-0, you're in the Big Ten championship game. You don't have to worry about such things. But I saw that break and realized, oh yeah, wait, that applies to Oregon now. So thought I'd keep you up to date. If you have questions, feel free to let me know. Shoot me a note on Twitter or if you're a Locked On Ducks insider, drop me a note over via subtext. So a couple more things. One of you sent me a question, including from the flock over there, what my favorite football movie is. This is tough. I love Remember the Titans, but do you know which movie I find myself watching far more than Remember the Titans? The Longest Yard. I'm a big fan. I love Chris Rock. I love Adam Sandler. The whole movie's great. I'm a big Longest Yard guy. Love Remember the Titans. Absolutely. That'd be my number 2, but favorite football movie? Yeah. Hey, I go with The Longest Yard. Last housekeeping item of the show for today. For those of you that have reached out about meeting up with me in person at the Oregon game on Saturday, there is a plan that is now in place. So I will be at a combination of tailgate spots, lots Z as in zebra, 70 and 71, which as you can imagine are right next to each other. They're in the southeast portion, away from the stadium, right next to the highway and across the street from Reeser South. It's like some DMX lot or something. I heard from a friend that who's organizing the tailgate, of course, that is what it is called. that is where I'll be. I'll probably be there by 1 o'clock or so. And I will be checking my phone often to communicate with any of you that want to come over and say hi, talk football, whatever and such. If you've reached out to me about that before, that's where I will be. If you have any questions, shoot me a note as always, but that is the plan. Lots Z70 and Z71 in the tailgate area, southeast of Autzen Stadium, or away from the southeast corner of Autzen Stadium. So if you don't know where that is, there's a map available on Google. Make sure you have the updated one because they changed the lot numbers. But again, any questions, let me know. Look forward to seeing you this weekend. Look forward to Oregon football being back. Thanks for making this your first listen. Go make Locked On College Football your second. I host over there, bringing you the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, which is back in full swing. I absolutely love it. Every day, Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.